Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how the Chancellor's announcement of the much needed extension to the furlough scheme not only represents his first major U-turn, but also might be an indicator that the Conservatives are concerned about the impact of Brexit, maybe, as well as COVID. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, as I think you've just heard, yet again, I said this in the earlier video, I'm going to have to say it in every video, I'm recording this on the evening of November the 5th, which is the date where in the UK we set fire to images of people and throw explosives into the sky. It's going to go on all night. There's nothing I can do about that, I'm afraid. But anyway, on to the actual meat here. Chancellor Rishi Sunak has announced that the furlough scheme, which was the job retention scheme we had in place for the first lockdown, which guaranteed 80% of people's wages if they weren't able to work, if their business sort of had to go into mothballs. But it ended last month and it's now to be extended. There was an announcement yesterday in Parliament, and not just the anticipated duration of the new COVID lockdown with a bit extra in England, which I have a thing or two to say about on behalf of the people of Wales, Scotland and I suppose Northern Ireland as well. It will run up until the end of March. Now, even given that there was likely to be a U-turn, up until the end of March, well, that's given it a good old run, almost a bigger run as it was for the first one. And of course, it doesn't rule out extending it still further. This was highly suspicious to me. And I did notice it prompted some other people to wonder if this furlough extension is also not just about COVID, but with a little bit of an eye on Brexit as well. First, the obvious controversy regarding this new extension of the furlough scheme, however. For weeks, quite a lot of weeks, various groups, including opposition parties, have been calling on the government to extend the furlough scheme beyond the end of October. When the government announced it originally, it got cross-party support. This is the sort of thing we need. Then the government said, right, we're going to take it away. And no one was really satisfied that what required it in the first place was going away. There's pressure on those jobs. So, you know, opposition parties called for the government to extend it, at least in a targeted way. It didn't have to be exactly the same, a targeted way. Look, it's like, look, there are businesses that even when we're out of lockdown are still knackered by COVID. They're perfectly good businesses, but while the pandemic is causing these restrictions to flare up around the country, these businesses cannot cope, they need help, and their workers need help. But no. Ian Blackford of the SNP made it a regular feature of his questions in Prime Minister's Questions. Keir Starmer of Labour pointed out the fact that there are businesses that are perfectly viable. They will be perfectly viable again after COVID. They just need that support during the pandemic. As a result, let's face facts, of the government's failure to offer targeted support. Extend the furlough scheme, they said. It will just encourage people to be lazy, said the Conservatives, who'd know a thing or two about being lazy. Besides, we can't afford it. Oh, really? Just like you said you couldn't afford to pay for starving kids' dinners, when then it turned out you could afford well over 10 times as much to pay for the dinners of upper middle class people who can dine out in restaurants. Is that the same way you can't afford it? Or in the same way that you can afford to waste billions of pounds on dodgy contracts for goods and services that very often are not really delivered, or not delivered to the quality that was expected. Is that what you mean by you can't afford it then? So the calls to extend the scheme fell on deaf ears anyway. They said, yeah, that's what we mean. Since then, I mean, Wales went into lockdown before England anyway. The government tried to put most of the north of England into something akin to a lockdown. No extension of the furlough scheme though. No. Andy Burnham of Greater Manchester has tried to say, look, we need the furlough scheme for Greater Manchester at least, because you're effectively putting us under lockdown here. You know, there's targeted, it wasn't saying for everyone, it's targeted for the businesses that you're telling they have to close. You need to help them out. No, we're not going to be doing that. That'd be silly. Then Boris Johnson put England into a general lockdown again, which meant the Tory heartlands, especially in the southeast of England, they would be facing much tougher restrictions, and again, the prospect of people not being able to go to work. Now, even when the government brought in regional restrictions, Like I said, particularly in the north of England, it's very stark. It was notable that they often didn't apply them to a lot of conservative areas. It was quite common for some Labour areas to be put in tough restrictions and conservative areas with way higher infection rates not. And now the Conservative supporters are all going to be put into these measures. So they're not going to be able to work in large numbers. And so that raised the prospect of large amounts of unemployment, not Scotland or Wales or the north of England, but the south of England. No, let's extend the furlough scheme. Yeah, that's the right thing to do. And none of this 67% rubbish either. None of that. The nice shiny 80% of your salary preserved. Not that it's all that shiny for the lowest paid workers who, quite frankly, I'm not sure how they cope on 100%. I gather in France, workers get 100% if they are at the lower end of the pay scale. But it's as shiny as we can expect. We can't expect any more from this government. And like I said, it's what the Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham asked for and was told no. Now, a couple of weeks later, all of a sudden, yes. It's what Starmer and Blackford asked for in a targeted way. Blackford very frequently for some workers, and they were refused. Well, now it's for all workers, effectively. Now everyone gets it. Everyone. Because all of a sudden it's important to conservative areas. It's an absolute outrage that these charlatans ever dare talk about others playing party politics. But anyway, the extension of the furlough has gone further than we would have expected. It's now going to run up until the end of March. The rest of the year plus the first full quarter of 2021. Now, this is a massive climb down for Rishi Sunak. Cannot overestimate that enough. This is, again, Boris Johnson, remember, is getting slated for constant U-turns. Rishi Sunak wants to become the next Prime Minister. This is a huge climb down for him. He resisted the move towards this against all reason for a very long time. Stood his ground for a very long time. But the thing is that the lockdown is lasting until December the 2nd. Now, okay, sure, nobody expects that to do the work instantly. In an optimistic appraisal, maybe, but probably not. So it's not like restrictions are going to be instantly lifted then. So, of course, we're not saying they would just extend it for a month. And I'm not complaining they're extending it as long as they are. I'm just curious why the Chancellor, who insisted that we wouldn't extend furlough beyond the end of October, even when we were quite clearly rolling into the second wave, when it was undeniable, when it had overtaken the first wave, he still was sticking to his guns. As late as last week, he was not going to extend furlough. Why would he backtrack on it to the point where he's now extending it for a full 5 months? Not extending it for a couple of months and wait and see, a full 5 months. And the answer could well be Brexit. Might not be, you know, but there are increasing warnings, of course, that we're already on our arse from COVID and that we're not going to improve until the spring at least. But Brexit is there to clobber us, you know, in January. It's waiting around the corner with a baseball bat. And I commented on the Institute for Government's report yesterday on how COVID has left businesses even less prepared for Brexit than a year ago due to COVID. This is to say nothing of the fact that the government are not even remotely prepared for the customs arrangements. And this furlough scheme is like the original, it's not really targeted. It doesn't help those specifically whose businesses are hit by COVID as such. It's there for anyone struggling as far as I can tell. I see no real reason why it could not be used by a business that had to go into semi-hibernation for another reason. Let's say the first few months of Brexit, for example. It's possible that the timing is just taking account of the fact that the government recognise they're never going to get on top of the pandemic with anything they do. So they are reliant upon new technologies by their own admission, as well as the spring to reduce the number of cases, because they're not going to do anything to reduce it. So it is possible they're just extending furlough up until then for that. But what if they also wanted to help people whose jobs would otherwise be lost due to the chaos of a disorderly Brexit in a way that doesn't draw attention to the fact that the government are compensating for the tragic impact of a Brexit that they said we would prosper under? Because they've constantly tried to hide the impact of Brexit behind COVID. They're very much hoping to do the same next year. Because as damaging as COVID-related large-scale unemployment would be for the government, because a lot of people, if they're going to lose their jobs and not get another one, they're not really going to care what philosophical reason you give for that. The government failed to protect their job, and that's all there is to it. So If they'd blame them for that anyway, surely unemployment resulting from Brexit would be much more damaging. Because after all, the pandemic is not the government's fault in itself. Our failure to handle it well is, but not everyone sees that anyway. But Brexit is 100% the government, and it doesn't really matter where you stand on the Brexit line. Even those who might wish to blame the EU for a bad Brexit will still know that Brexit has been manufactured. It's not a natural act. It didn't descend suddenly on us. Boris Johnson is one of the architects of Brexit, and we've had years to prepare. The government will do everything they can to smooth out the damage caused, and job income support could be an obvious way to do that. Our economy is shrinking, tanking in fact, and we are intending to put it under further strain in the new year. There's none of Johnson's promise to level up the country anymore, or build, build, build. That's not happening. Just a series of desperate acts to limit the damage caused by their own hubris, malice and incompetence. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hopefully you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.